Thank you very much, Heidi and Oliver and Bernard and Chris, everybody, for your presentations. I'll start us off with a central question that never gets answered enough, and that is that for all of these programs, we need to marry public and private investment, and we need to marry public and private commitment to the programs, because you can't just have them as a public regulated initiative, and you can't just have them private. Both sides need to work together. So I would like to just ask each of you, how do you see that being done on a realistic basis for the types of programs you were talking about? And how can we help the market to move forward?
In fact, it's a very difficult question, because I think if there is if exists a quite satisfying response, it will be already known. But in fact, my opinion is, at the first time, as I said, we must ask the question of the global interest of what we do, and think, because it's in this problem of smart grid, more or demand response, in a particular case of demand response, you invest in one part of the value chain, and the value is elsewhere. So I think the first thing is to ask the question, what is the global interest? When I was more young, it was what we call the global surplus in economy. I think we have a little forgotten this concept in practice, so perhaps it is the first question. The second question is probably to implement to deal between complexity and interest of the complexity. What I mean, for instance, my opinion, for domestic, for retail market, as you say, you don't need very sophisticated thing, because I don't think that people are going to look at the iPad to see what is the price of electricity at every time, every house, and change the way they consume. So I think it's not the case, for instance, for industrial consumer who are very involved in how to save money, and there are specialized people in this company who do the job. So perhaps to have a deal between complexity and interest of the complexity, and I think these two drivers, global interest and the deal between complexity and interest of the complexity, perhaps can be two cases. Perhaps not the only case, but two cases. Of course, we have to think of market design. For instance, in France, there is a lot of discussion about the capacity market, for instance, not yet finished. And I think the case of capacity market is quite interesting, because if you take the pure economic theory, you don't need a capacity market, because if you have the price, the real market price, it will give you the price of the capacity. But in fact, what happens? People don't want to have a price going too high, because they don't accept a price for the I don't know, for instance, 1 million for 1 megawatt hour, for instance. And in fact, it can happen when there is a very short, very critic period. So people, what happens in the market, people say the price will not go above, I don't know, in France it was 2,000 euro by megawatt hour. And we are obliged to create a capacity market in order to show the real value of capacity. So I think that in this case we have also there is also a psychological effect on this. So it perhaps the third case, the psychological effect of what happens. No, and not a complete...
I'll take a shot at it. So I showed in my slide the benefits of the smart grid. So the easy part from a societal perspective is adding those up. Now the hard part is who are the actors who are involved in delivering those benefits and receiving them. Now in the end, the consumer pays, the energy users. That's the only place the money can come from. Because it benefits numerous entities, it's really an infrastructure, whether you're talking about the smart meter infrastructure and information infrastructure or wholesale market structures that allow for demand response. And so the first decision is it cost effective? And that's for government regulators to determine that yes, it is cost effective, or don't do it. And then the second way is to look at, or second step is to look at who has to make the investment and how do you ensure that they recover their costs. So if it's a regulated utility, which is the case of most of these, or a regulated TSO, then they recover it in regulated rates. If it's a retail market like the UK, all of the suppliers presumably are going to be given the same obligation, so they all have to make the investment, and they're not disadvantaged on a competitive basis. So it's really identifying the costs and then identifying the specific ways of how you reimburse the investors.
Oliver, maybe I can change the question a little bit just to twist it. I know everybody here is very interested in the role of the aggregator and how that really works. So could you tell us a little bit more about your business model and what you need to make your business model a success?
So, hello? Is it working? Yeah. We as a demand response aggregator focus purely on industrial and commercial demand response, not on residential. Purely, I have not yet seen a business case which provides a return of investment if you switch a washing machine and you have to implement a little bit piece of device, whatever it is, a smart meter. So the return of investment is not there. But in a commercial industrial demand response play, you have much higher loads. So if I go out and I started off with, for instance, breweries, I have on average 1 megawatt of load which I can switch. Nowadays, even big foundries are coming to us and want to be connected to our NOC, to our Network Operations Center. So I have, with one foundry, 10, 12, 13 megawatts, which you can switch. Just talk a little bit to the numbers. 1 megawatt of switchable load is more likely than 1,000 washing machines. Even more. I believe in simplicity. So from my perspective, and it's very easy, we connect to the PLCs. So this is the programmable logical controller, which is implemented in each industry. And those programmable logical controllers are there, they're already implemented. So I just need to have an interface, which we don't have yet standards, but I do need an interface, and once this interface is implemented, I can access those loads. And then, of course, if you have connected 10, 20, hundreds of loads individually, the challenge is to build out of these single loads a load curve, because only this load curve can be commercialized and provides value. And so we commercialize those load curves, those brick walls, if you want, to the TSO. The TSO has basically one job, just to stabilize the power. He looks if there's 50 hertz coming out of the plug. And there are three products. There's tertiary reserve, there's secondary reserve, and primary reserve. And this is only a question of the time those reserves can be called on. So we started off in tertiary reserve. So we have a lead time of 15 minutes. So the TSO is sending us a signal and says, well, I need 10 megawatts of load which you curtail. So basically loads I shut off for a few minutes, sometimes only. And so I have 15 minutes of time to send through the signals to the consumers, to the participants, I call them, industrial, commercial. And then I build a brick wall. And once I have done so, I provide a signal back to the TSO and says, well, we have 10, 15 megawatts of loads shut off. And so you are questioning probably, so how does a TSO believe I have really shut off 10 or 15 megawatts? Well, for over 1 year, we worked together with the TSO to implement a so-called baseline methodology. And that took us quite some while. But I think now they are quite confident whatever we tell them, that's the true load we have switched off. So this is on a high note what we do, and that's the business model we engage. It's not easy, I can tell you. Because if you go out to industrial business, I mean, you tell them you want to connect directly to their load, right? You want to go through their firewalls. You get questioned, what's the cost of doing so? What's the opportunity cost? What about the security? What about the data? But after 2 years of doing so, we are now quite sophisticated to find the right approach for different type of businesses. So the main challenge I see at the moment is the energy system as it is as of today, and it goes back to a regulatory framework. So for instance, there are balancing group managers, that's the financial accounting of the electricity if you so want. So with each of these balancing group managers we have to make a contract, and that's a challenge. It's not as easy as it could be. So here we would also need a standardized process. No.
Thank you very much. Now if we go to the other end of the spectrum, and we've looked at what's required for making commercial industrial participation possible. Heidi, one of the things I thought that was interesting that you brought up was that there are as many types of consumers as there are consumers. Have you given any thought for how you would create a national strategy for engaging consumers that isn't incredibly confusing? How would you do that? You can only have one national strategy, and yet you have all these different types of consumers. How do you balance those? And maybe, Chris, maybe you thought of that as well. I'm only asking hard questions today. Sorry.
Okay, there's a couple of issues. I guess just before moving on to that question, it was just interesting in terms of the investment costs you were talking about. From a consumer perspective, at the end of the day, there is the question as to how much of the costs will be taken on board by the investors, by the shareholders, and how much we pass down to the consumers. At the end of the day, if it appears in our energy bills or it appears in the cost of what we pay for products, then likewise we would have a share and interest. So part of where I was coming from is at the end of the day, you need to think about what do we think is value for money. So this is where the transparency of the investments and the justification of the value to consumers is key. Because it is a big concern now, the rising prices. It's all the more important to take account of that. And that's just one element of the strategy. What we were talking about is governments taking a coordinated approach. And it means a governmental approach to the roles, the policies of the different ministries involved, or of the local authorities, or of the communications programs. It means simply joining up the different policies. It also means, understanding what you're trying to achieve. Behavioural change programs will always start from the basis of needing very clear outcomes and then working backwards from that on the policies that are needed to deliver them. Because a scattergun approach won't achieve the outcome you need. So it does mean a governmental lead in joining up the policies and recognising what is needed to achieve the outcome.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
And just to build on that, a clear vision for consumers is really what's needed. That they want to know, all energy users, they want to know what is happening and why is it happening and what does it mean for them. So that the utilities that have been very successful with their customers in these rollouts do a good job of reaching out and communicating those things to them. I think from a government's perspective, it's important to have that vision. Why are we doing smart meters? Well, it will support renewables, it will support emission reductions, it will enable you to understand your usage, and if you want to save energy, and it will give you access to off-peak, lower price energy if you want to do that. But that, a very simple, 30-second, what is this, why are we doing this, what does this mean for me? Well, you're going to get a new device, you're going to get more information, you're going to have the ability to choose a different price option. You can do absolutely nothing if you don't want to do anything. There's going to be a cost to that. It's going to end up in your energy rates. We as a government have conducted analyses, and we believe that over time you'll save money. In the UK, it's what, 18 or 19 billion in savings versus 11 billion in costs. So that's really as much as they need to hear, but they need to hear that clearly, simply, and frequently. It's number one rule in marketing: repeat, repeat, repeat.
Thank you. I think from the public side and the technology development side, the business is clear because obviously everybody's interested in creating more business. A question I actually get personally quite a lot as the executive director of the SEDC is, what are the utilities doing in your coalition? And what's in it for them? So, Bernard.
It's a pleasure to go in Brussels first. Now, to be frank, in fact, as I show, in fact, utilities are, in fact, EDF since a long time, because, as you know, EDF was a front runner of what we call marginal cost tariff. We're very engaged in demand response, and it's quite an interesting question, because you don't ask why utilities are engage on, for instance, on investment on power plants. It seems quite obvious that utility must be engaged or interested in investment on power plant or grid and so on. And when we look at the case of EDF, I know this case well. We are very engaged since a long time, as I explained, in demand response. I show you the first case of demand response was a world one, but it's working very well. There was other business model were developed with, of course, dynamic pricing, and still we are thinking about other level of demand response. Anticipating the fact that even in France there will be a lot of wind farms, more than about 20 gigawatts in 2020, sorry. We think that since a long time, and especially now, demand response is quite an important level to have the equilibrium between generation and demand. We have also a new space of interest as a local optimization, because in fact, as you know, it's more and more difficult to build a transmission grid, and we have two places in France with the west of France, Brittany, and the southeast of France with Provence, where we have some difficulty to build transmission grid, and so the demand response is also a level to solve the problem. We look to other level like storage and things like that. I just want to say one thing, if I can. I think that I say that for the first question. I don't know if I will be very clear, but that we have to think about the global surplus. And in fact, for the commercial industrial market, I think there is a lack of theoretical studies on the value, for instance, of the primary reserve and secondary reserve and so on. I don't know, perhaps you know, but I don't know scientific studies about this. What is the real value of primary reserve, secondary reserve? And so I think for Olivier, for instance, it's very difficult to get a business model, because you have no objective value of what is the value of, for example, primary reserve. And so I think that we have not to think that everything, as I said, is a political or regulatory issue. It's also a scientific issue. Also, I recommend in R&D, so I did a special, but special advice. But I think that you have a lot of work to do of this, and I think that you have probably in the electric system forgotten that you have to invest also in scientific research about value of things like the primary reserve or the other things. Or, for instance, another example, what is the value of a network, for instance? It generally they are built on technical point of view, but not on economical point of view. So I think that to develop smart point, I think we need still a lot of scientific works.
Let me try to answer a little bit what my experience is with regards to the business case of demand response. I talked about a dirty secret. Of course, if you have renewables, there's a lot of intermittency. You need gas peakers. Don't get me wrong. I foresee the next decades we still need gas peakers to balance out the intermittency of solar and wind. But if you bring on a gas peaker for less than an hour, this gas peaker is not commercially to be run. You can't recover your investment costs. And that's the major challenge if you build now generation units. First of all, there's no clarity about the legislative framework. That's a big challenge, for instance, in Europe, in Germany especially. And then if you build such a gas peaker, and you are called on by a TSO to provide balancing power, and if you're called on just for 30, 40 minutes, maybe sometimes for 5 minutes, your gas peaker is not in money. And that's the value demand response can bring on, because the biggest potential, flexibility potential you can gather from the industry and commercial side is just sometimes to shift load a few minutes, up to half an hour, up to 1 hour. So that's where I see the biggest value. For utility, well, we are living now in a liberalized markets and in an unbundled world. So you have departments within the utilities, and not always they're talking to each other anymore. At least that's my experience in Germany. But think about the sales department of a utility. What's their challenge? They have a commodity, and the margins on this commodity are very low. And especially in Germany, since they shut off many of the nuclear power plants, there is not a lot of money coming in from nuclears, hence so they have really a challenge. And the customers are changing the energy provider maybe on a yearly basis. So demand response can help you with regards to customer retention and new customer acquisition. So that's on the sales department. I talked about demand response being a virtual peaking power plant or virtual peaking power system, and it looks like to a generator like each other generation unit. So on the generation side, you can optimize your portfolio and do portfolio optimization. For the trading, the same thing, right? A trader has to decide either to bring on their own generation unit or buy the energy on the energy exchange, for instance. Instead, also, bringing on their own generation unit, they can give us a signal and we curtail loads. So there is a lot of value in, but I agree with Bernard. The business case is not yet fully clear, and that's maybe the reason we don't have, for instance, also a clear target for demand response. We have clear targets if it comes to bringing on renewables to the grid. We have clear targets about CO2 savings. What's our target for demand response? How many businesses, for instance, 20% of all the business should participate in demand response programs by 2020? So we need to really get clear what's the benefit, and for sure we can calculate a business case. We work and enable utilities as of today, in most cases, and before we do so, we calculate a business case and convince the different departments of a utility that demand response is of value.
Just a quick final comment. The title of our session is Smart Services. We talk a lot of theory, but and this is a different market from Europe, but I would encourage you to keep an eye on Texas and California, where all of these things are reality today. In Texas, in a competitive retail market, in California, in a vertically integrated market. But consumers large energy users, small energy users can pick suppliers. They get offers of smart thermostats. They get time-based pricing. They get demand response programs offered to them, and prepayment services. So it's a real-world laboratory, in-home displays with real-time interfaces to the meters and so on. So it's a great place to keep an eye on and see what are energy users actually buying in this free and open market where the technologies are live now.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for the discussion. To wrap up very, very quickly, I thought it was interesting to hear. I'd never heard the principle of needing more scientific research into areas of value. And I think that's a very valid point. I mean, if you want this to become a real market, why shouldn't utilities be as interested in the demand side resources as they are in the generation side resources? What's required there is proper knowledge about the areas of value, like Oliver and Bernard were both saying. Then we had also a similar, from both sides, a call from Heidi of let's have one place to go, let's have an easy access, repeatable, clear information. From Oliver as well, let's have one place to go, let's have clear value propositions, don't make me write different types of contracts with every single type of consumer out there, so repeatable. These are all definitely things we can take care of. None of this is trying to land a man on Saturn. It's all things that we can do. And I think the encouraging thing for us who've been in this industry for a while is that each year we do see progress. And each year we see a higher level of interest within the industry and more realistic programs coming out. So I look forward to continuing the discussion further on. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, could you take a seat, please? Is this working?